So welcome to this week's Optimum Health Clinic Facebook Live. And you'll probably have noticed it's not Wednesday and it's not even near 6 o'clock. The Facebook Live yesterday ended up having to be rescheduled, and which was going to be an interview with Jem about her recovery story. There were some scheduling issues on my side. That will still happen. I think it's going to be in 3 or 4 weeks' time. We are looking to move towards doing more recovery stories, bringing back a little bit the format of what we used to have historically in Secrets to Recovery. But today I've got probably a bit shorter than planned, but just something that kind of an idea that I've been playing with in some other places, particularly around a book that I'm writing at the moment. And it's a very simple idea, and in a sense it's implicit in a lot of other Facebook Lives that I've done, and yet it seemed that it would be helpful to put it out there as a kind of specific topic and idea on of its own. And basically the principle is that we are all messed up, or another way, if I was being slightly more provocative in my language, we're all effed up, in the sense that we all have issues. And this may be a big surprise to some of you, and it may be no surprise to some of you. And when I say we all, I don't just mean people with ME, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, people that recover from that. I mean people in the world. Like pretty much everyone you know in your life has issues. They have things that they are struggling with. The reason why I think that it's important to make that an explicit point is when we're on the recovery path, one of the things that happens is somewhat inevitably we get heavily focused on our own psychology, our own emotions, our own self-development, partly because it's necessary just to help us kind of navigate the challenge of living with a chronic illness, but also it can be a key factor in supporting ourselves towards recovery. But when we start to get that focus, we start to see more and more of the things about ourselves which perhaps could do with some work. The places where we have issues, we have challenges, we have things that are unresolved, we have ways of approaching our life which perhaps are not as optimal or as helpful as they could be. And as we start to do that and we start to talk more about that, those around us start to become more aware of that. And one of the things that I think is quite dangerous that starts to happen is we then start to build this self-image or this idea of ourselves as, because we're doing the self-development work, because we're identifying and recognizing things to work on, that somehow we're different to other people in the population, that we are more messed up, we have more issues than other people. And yet one could argue that the difference is not that there is more issues that we have, the difference is actually we're making ourselves aware of those and we're actually actively working with them. One of the things that was fascinating 15 years ago, 16 years ago, when I started my career working as a practitioner, was the amount of times in the early years, particularly before I started working a lot with people with ME, chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, was the number of people that I would work with that on the surface would, and perhaps even initially in the consultation, or certainly to people in their life, would appear to have it all together, whatever that means, have their shit together. And yet, of course, part of the reason they were coming to see me was because there were some things that they wanted to work on. And then you'd kind of dig beneath the surface and recognize that sometimes those that have the best presentation of themselves, like look the most together, look the most like their life is kind of wonderful and perfect, are actually the ones that have the biggest problems. Because in some ways they're so attached to things looking like they are perfect that they're not then paying attention to and dealing with the things which actually are not where they ideally could be. And so the more that we start to work on ourselves, the more we start to become aware of our own challenges and struggles, and we start to compare ourselves to the rest of the population, we can start to feel more isolated and like we're different and we're not like other people and all the issues exist here and other people haven't got struggles they're going on with. Now, it may be true to say that, of course, not everyone's dealing with a severe chronic illness, and that inevitably is a greater level of suffering and difficulty. But it doesn't mean that you've got issues that you're having to work with and others don't have issues. And the reason why, part of the reason why that's so important to recognize is it starts to become, if it's not seen in this kind of light, it starts to become an impact on people's self-esteem and their self-worth and their confidence, and it can impact people when they start to come back into the world and have this sense of, oh my God, I've been through this really difficult, intense life experience, and I discovered all this stuff about myself, and somehow I'm now a lesser person than others because I discovered I had all this stuff. The point that I'm really trying to make is, my guess is that most people in your life have got as many struggles or difficulties in their personality stuff that's going on. They just haven't had an intense spotlight on them and an intense need to work on them to facilitate their recovery process. So in some ways, you could say that actually you're fortunate. Now, dare I say that, someone that's actively in the recovery process, because it certainly won't feel like that. But there is at least that opportunity to be forced to see those things we otherwise may not see. A way that I've often put this is that really in life there are three types of people. There are people which have issues and will not even recognise them to themselves. There are then people that have issues and recognise them to themselves but won't share them with others. And then there are people that have issues and they're willing to recognise them to themselves and with others. If we can't even recognise the issues to ourselves, we've got no chance of working on things and changing them. If we can recognise them to ourselves, but somehow we're not yet able to talk to other people about them, then the challenge is it's difficult to actually get help and support in terms of working with those issues. If we can actually start talking to others, we can actually get that support, and also what we start to do is we start to change the culture that we live in. Because much of the culture we live in is a culture of people living on the surface and talking about all the things that are great in their life and hiding the struggles and the difficulties that they have. So I would strongly encourage, firstly, building the courage to talk more freely about the struggles that you have in your life. I think you'll find that others will open up significantly as a result of doing that. It was one of the amazing things that happened when I published my first book, was suddenly I had this depth of contact with people that resonated with the experiences that I'd had, even if they hadn't had or weren't experiencing ME chronic fatigue, just the experiences of struggling with one's own emotions and one's life and feeling trapped and feeling stuck. And I would also strongly recommend looking out for a pattern where you are labeling yourself as having issues and others as not. Recognize we're all in this together. We all have our struggles. Even those that have been through ME chronic fatigue and recover, and when you're on that journey, people that are recovered look like they're living this utopian, amazing life. And of course, in many ways they are, right? They're not dealing with chronic illness anymore. But that doesn't mean everything in their life is perfect. They still have the life challenges that we experience. So yeah, be aware of this pattern. It can be very isolating. It's not an accurate pattern. And it doesn't serve anyone if we hide the struggles that we have. Now, of course, we need to be careful and selective of who we open ourselves up to. We want to make sure that we open ourselves up in a way that we do get the care and the support that's appropriate. But we also have to teach people how to be supportive. Like, we are explicitly asking for what we need. And if we're talking about our emotions and feelings and someone's just trying to fix it and solve the problem, we can feel quite unseen. And we might say, actually, I don't need the solution right now. I just need you to hear what I'm saying and to listen. So we're all messed up. We all have issues. If you're struggling emotionally, it doesn't make you different to the rest of the population. It might be you're in an intense chapter, and we go through different chapters of our lives and things change at different points. But you're not alone. You're not the only one. And just because you're in an intense chapter doesn't mean you always will be. So I hope that's been useful. It's a bit shorter than usual, but please share your comments and your thoughts underneath the video. Bye-bye for now.